Cybersecurity is my passion. I'm fortunate to be a professor in a university, so a large part of my actual career has been about mentoring research assistants and PhD students working on homomorphic encryption, which is the holy grail of cloud security. The IEEE is the most prestigious technical organization in the world. Being a senior member at the IEEE is a badge of honor. IEEE is my competitive edge.
All right, everybody, welcome to the June edition of the IEEE-USA Government Relations Washington Update. I am Eric Heilman, the Director of Government Relations for IEEE-USA here in Washington, D.C. We are not quite 6 months through the craziness of 2025, but we're almost there. There's a lot that's happened since the last time we did one of these webinars, and so we've got a lot of information to share with you. Several slides worth of details, and as usual, I will try and go through them fairly quickly, but with the right amount of detail, and hopefully leave you with some questions to ask towards the end. So as usual, let's start with kind of the high level, what's happening. The Trump-Musk breakup is obviously front and center, even though it happened a few weeks ago. Most of us that saw the beginning of this relationship kind of predicted that at some point it was going to end, and probably pretty badly, and probably pretty quickly, frankly. Nevertheless, it's happened, and the impacts of which are going to be felt for a long time, I think. Elon Musk had a significant impact in the city of Washington, D.C., the federal government, the federal workforce, the federal budget. And where all this goes from here is really unknown. But I think it's safe to say that the effects of his actions and the Doge actions that he directed are going to reverberate for a number of years, and could be permanent in some fashion. We're going to talk a little bit about this reconciliation bill. We've mentioned it a few times in the last couple of months as it's been picking up steam, but haven't really gone into a lot of detail. It's now front and center. And there are some things in there that are important that we are working on and tracking and are advocating for and against. I'll show you a little bit more about that. And I'll give you the latest on what's happening with the federal budget, with the FY26 congressional appropriations piece to put together the final budget for the next fiscal year. There's a lot happening there as well. Nominations are still moving through the United States Senate. It does typically take some time for a new president to get all of his nominees through the United States Senate. This is taking a little bit longer than normal, but we are down sort of at the sub-cabinet level on a lot of these. And many of those are extremely important positions, and frankly, the ones that we often work with directly when it comes to a lot of the issues that you care about and a lot of the agencies that you care about and that we work with. So things are still going on there. We rarely talk about trade here, but obviously trade is front and center with President Trump right now, and a lot of tariff issues going on. He has been negotiating with China on a trade deal and announced a deal. There was one earlier with the United Kingdom. So trade and tariffs are still very top of mind for a lot of people here in Washington. And as we're nearing the end of this month, members of Congress, as they are apt to do, are looking ahead to the next recess period. Where Congress is in recess and all of the members of Congress, senators go home and work from home, work with constituents, do tours, do different types of things to stay in touch with their constituents and their home bases. But it's always something that when you're working in the heat of Washington, proverbially and weather temperature wise, it's always nice to look forward to getting out of town if you're a member of Congress. So that's what's going on high level. So let's dive in first to this reconciliation bill. It is officially called, and this is, I'm not kidding, officially called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I think, of 2025. It was informally called the One Big Beautiful Bill because that's what the president called it. And the House Republicans grabbed it and stuck it on, and that's now what it's called. It has passed the House. It essentially is a very large legislative package that has a number of priorities of President Trump's that House Republicans, congressional Republicans, Senate as well, wanted to pass through in this first year of the president's term. And without going into too much wonky detail, as I think I've alluded to in the past, it's called reconciliation because that is a specific process largely used in the Senate, but also in the House, that bypasses a lot of the traditional rules about how you need to pass a bill and the number of votes that are required. It still needs a majority, but it's a lot easier to pass, especially in the Senate, if you package it and tie it to budgetary spending in a way that's frankly really complicated. And that process is called the reconciliation process. So we just end up calling it the reconciliation bill. Everyone knows what you're talking about here. And it's got a lot of stuff in there. It's got stuff on taxes. President Trump's first term saw one of the most significant tax reform changes to the federal tax code in decades. And a number of those provisions that was in 2017 are expiring soon. And a lot of those were tax cuts ultimately. And obviously, if you allow a tax cut to expire, it becomes a tax increase. It goes back to the previous rates or the previous provisions. And clearly that is something that President Trump wants to avoid. Congressional Republicans and in some cases Democrats in some of these provisions would like to avoid as well. So there's a pretty big tax component to this piece. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of immigration and border security stuff because that is clearly part of President Trump's priority. There's things on welfare-related programs, Medicaid, SNAP, which is basically food stamps, what the program is now, as well as things on student loans. It raises the debt ceiling limit for the United States and its borrowing authority. Frankly, that's something that a lot of conservatives have a problem with. There's also a piece in there on auctioning off pieces of the spectrum. And that's pretty contentious right now. Obviously, it's kind of in our wheelhouse as an organization focused on technology policy. And I'm sure many of our members are very much involved in that. And I know many have a history in that. I'll get into a little bit about that soon because there's a lot of moving parts. And then there was a piece in there that I'll show you shortly that we weighed in on related to AI and specifically federal preemption of state laws related to AI, also very controversial. So there's a lot of stuff in there. And as you'll see, or as you can see in the slide here, the House passed it in the wee hours. Actually, it was a very early morning of May 22nd. I think they went in an all-night session on the floor debating, considering amendments, going through the process. And if you look at the count there, it passed by one vote, which is frankly extraordinary and is got a lot of kudos headed to Speaker Mike Johnson because getting this very slim majority to come together on such a massive piece of legislation, bringing his moderates and his conservatives together to support something like this was very, very challenging. And politically speaking, he did a good job just sort of holding this together and getting it passed. Now it's with the Senate, and that's where there's a lot of interesting things going on. They are going to be crafting their own version of a bill. It will not look like the bill that the House passed. And the expectation is that the Senate version will be ready for the full floor next week. They will debate it, consider amendments, and presumably pass it before they go out of recess for that July 4th week, the following week. That's what's going on right now in the Senate. And because there were a handful of provisions that were of interest to us, we wanted to kind of put a marker down on a few of them, which this is kind of a typical way of doing things. We want to get on the record and make sure that we have communicated priorities to leaders in a particular chamber or committee or whatever. In this case, it was really that last piece down there, the federal preemption of state laws, that, prompted a lot of consternation and concern among many of our members, particularly those who work in AI, who are on our very active and very involved AI policy committee. And there were some very, very serious concerns about this language preempting state laws and the ramifications of that, not just from a practical perspective and a technological perspective, but also from a legal perspective. And we agreed that we were going to wait to weigh in until after this bill passed the House. I think even as that process was moving in the House and that particular piece was being debated, it kind of was clear that in the end, it was not going to stay in as the House was envisioning it. So we decided to write a letter to the Senate leaders once the House bill was passed to make some comments on the House bill and sort of praise some things that we liked in there and ask them to retain them essentially, but also criticize that AI piece, which again was very concerning to a number of our members. And this is just a small list of things that are in that letter. That letter is on our website in our policy log under the public policy tab. This is where all of the communications that we send to Capitol Hill and to the agencies lies. You can go see the rest of this letter. But we hit on some investments in some key pieces of technology that we like: shipbuilding, marine systems. And then there are some tax pieces that were modified, extended in a way that we thought was very helpful, related to R&D and advanced manufacturing. And then there's another tax piece that we've supported through coalition activities to essentially extend the Section 529 college savings account to allow for them to be used for professional certificates, licensing, credentials, that sort of thing. Obviously something that IEEE is involved in and something we care about. And then, as I mentioned, we did weigh in opposition to that state preemption piece of AI. So that's what's going on with the reconciliation bill. Again, expect the Senate to pass it either by the end of next week or before July 4th. And then you've got two separate bills: House passed, Senate passed. They have to reconcile those. I'm using the word reconcile, but that's in a different context than the reconciliation bill. They need to conference those. They need to go to a joint conference and come up with an identical bill that then has to be passed again by each chamber before it goes to the president for a signature. So this thing is a long way from being done. Sometimes these conference committees are fast tracked, boom, gavel down, you're done. Sometimes they are extremely drawn out, very political, very contentious. Everything that was debated in each of the chambers is going to get reopened again. And it's just a different sort of context for in the legislative process. So lots of twists and turns still on this one. And I suspect we're going to be talking about this certainly throughout the summer and maybe even into the early fall. So let's talk a little bit more now about what's going on with the FY26 appropriations and federal budget process. As you recall, the president had submitted his budget later than is typically expected, and with not as much detail as is normally expected. It was sort of deemed a skinny budget. Obviously, and as we've spoken at length here, the numbers, the levels that were requested for a number of federal agencies that are very important to IEEE, to our members, to the scientific research technological community were beyond disappointing. They were frightening, frankly. And so the Congress now has to do what it typically does with these, is to put their own mark on it, piece it together in their own way. And that's never easy. And it was just recently that the House kind of started its process. And this little clip, the snippet here from Congressional Quarterly News from yesterday kind of just sums it up, really. The subcommittees of the House Appropriations Committee have been doing their little pieces, which when they finish and pass it, it goes to the full Appropriations Committee. And then each little one kind of goes through that process and then gets put back together at the end. And the House full committee is kind of struggling to get things through. And then over in the Senate side, there is a relationship in terms of timing, but as well as budgetary impact and policy between the appropriations process and the reconciliation bill. And as the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Susan Collins, alluded to, they're kind of stuck right now just from a procedural and timing perspective. So all of this is essentially previewing one of two things when we hit the end of this current fiscal year and roll into the next fiscal year, which this budget is supposed to fund. And you're not going to be surprised to hear this, either a shutdown or another continuing resolution, which is that mechanism by which government funding continues through the previous year's numbers. And that's kind of the way things have been happening for a number of years. And obviously we hit that level, that point many times, as I've spoken to you at various times in the year. And I fully expect that to happen again. The end of the fiscal year is September 30th. October 1 is the beginning of FY26. they're not going to have all this done by then. It's just impossible. So stay tuned. And in the meantime, the numbers that were proposed by the president, the numbers that Congress is considering and wrestling with are way too low for what we believe is workable, feasible, manageable, you name it. And we are doing everything we can to weigh in in various levels. We've sent a number of letters through various coalitions. These are just a couple of them that we did as part of one of the coalitions that we're in, the Energy Sciences Coalition. So this is specific to a couple of the Department of Energy budgets that are important. The full letters, these are just snippets of them, are also on our policy log, so you can see the full verbiage there. And then there's the list of signatories when it comes to the coalition. And we need you to weigh in. This is something that we have recently launched. We are socializing it a lot more widely among the IEEE community here in the United States. And I highly invite you to go to our webpage, click on the link that's there. And this QR code obviously takes you directly there. And let your voice be known. This is an action alert that we have put together. And we don't do these very often, but when we do, it's important. And frankly, the last few have kind of been on this topic, unfortunately. This is where you can go in, you fill out your information, your name, your address, which is where you vote, where you're registered to vote. And then we have populated a window with a letter that you may send to your member of Congress. You can alter it as well if you want to say what you want to say. But we highly, highly encourage you to go visit this, send something. We've had it up for about 2 weeks now. And haven't really widely socialized it. We're just kind of starting to really roll it out more, especially now that we're at kind of a good tipping point with what's happening in Congress on these numbers and with this budget, to where the more impact that this alert has and the more that IEEE members are able to communicate to their member of Congress, the more noise that it will create. And that really is the goal. We've got about 550 so far messages that have gone from IEEE members to their members of Congress. And so please go and visit this and do this. And if you do, and you get a response, feel free to send it our way. We're always kind of curious what comes out the other end of this. I've worked on Capitol Hill, so I've managed my fair share of constituent letters and incoming mail batches on a particular issue. But I'm always kind of curious now how responses are handled from various offices. So if you do this and you get a response from your member of Congress, please let us know. It'd be great to see what they are saying and how they're handling these. Again, spread this, put it on your LinkedIn page. We're doing a little more social media on it. We want to amplify this and get it out as much as possible. In the meantime, there's a lot of other things going on that we are working as usual. And I mentioned nominations. One nomination that I'm tracking in particular, and frankly, am fairly optimistic about, is the nominee to be the State Department Undersecretary of State for, I got to get this right, Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment. They call it the E family, the E group at the State Department. Jacob Hellberg is a really good nominee. He is an advisor in the Palantir group to Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir. And he also has served as the commissioner for the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. He's a writer, an academic. He's got business credentials. He's extremely intellectual, very, very well regarded. He was pretty close to Sam Altman, which kind of may have pulled him into the Trump orbit. But he was nominated, just had his confirmation hearing in the United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations Tuesday. And he did great. And what I was particularly looking for in terms of issues that are important to us, and why I'm watching this nomination, and why we're sort of keyed in on this particular piece of the State Department, is because this is the piece that has a very important program under it that was originally authorized and appropriated money for through the CHIPS and Science Act to work with friendly nations to realign the global supply chain for semiconductors, to bring down our reliance on certain countries and certain regions, diversify it, and make it so that if we have another pandemic, we have some other major disruption globally, we aren't reliant so heavily on one country or one region for a key component or a key piece of components upstream, that we have the economic challenges that we had in the last pandemic when it came to semiconductors and all of the products and materials that they go into. That's a long-winded way of saying it's a pretty important component. Now, obviously, the federal government and certainly the State Department are undergoing a lot of transition and change right now. And we don't exactly know where this program that came through the CHIPS and Science Act will end up, how it will end up. I'm not worried that it's going to go away. It might transform, it might be renamed, it might sort of be broken apart into different pieces of the department. But this is the guy that will probably be leading the whole effort. And he's been saying some good things. He's a China hawk, so his view on all this, leads to some supply chain, changes. And we had started working with the State Department on this last year. We've got the technical expertise, obviously, within our membership, and there was a nice partnership going. And now we're kind of just waiting to see how the dust settles. And I look forward to re-engaging soon, and maybe even getting to meet and speak with Mr. Helberg as soon as he's confirmed. So we're looking at that one pretty closely, and just now we need the full Senate to vote him in, and then he'll be sworn in. Executive orders. I talked about this one last month, but I have a fun little update on this. So right before last month's Washington update, there was an executive order on AI and schools, K through 12 schools. It was also college level vocational and whatnot. A lot of stuff in there that we kind of took a look at and went, yeah, there's a lot of overlap here with what IEEE does, is interested in. There's a lot of programs and initiatives that we do. And so we started working with IEEE educational activities pretty quickly to take a look at this and figure out, could we do something? Could we partner with the federal government on some of these programs? Could we figure out a way to partner with states who might be looking to implement some of this stuff? And so this was the slide that I had up there with the little opportunities for IEEE. And lo and behold, we got some action out of it pretty quickly, and it was good action. I was able to connect with Jennifer Fong, who works at IEEE Educational Activities on these programs, and she was able to come down to Washington, and we had a good set of meetings with a lot of the right people. We went to OSTP, the Office of Science, Technology, Policy, at the White House, and talked to one of the people that will be responsible for implementing that executive order. And he was very interested in what we had to offer, what we were doing. Stay tuned as to where and how this is going to bear fruit. But it was a really, really good opportunity to get in front of the right people within the administration who were going to be working this. And then we went to Capitol Hill, met with a good handful of staff who work in education policy, and just had a really good day of exposing IEEE and a different piece of IEEE to policymakers. And we're already starting to have further conversations with them about ways that we can continue working together. So that was a fun development that I wanted to share. There continues to be legislation that's important to us that we are asked to support and we endorse here and there when we, it's the right bill, right policy, and our leadership agrees that it should be supported. There was one that Mr. Foster, Bill Foster, Democrat of Illinois, and then our friend Jay Obernolte, Republican from California, introduced, sort of related to giving a pathway for Russian nationals who come to the United States and have STEM experience, giving them sort of a permanent resident status pathway. Very small and narrow piece of legislation related to some immigration and some STEM work, but nevertheless something that we were very happy to put our name onto, and we'd like to see this thing pass. Back on the executive order front, a couple of weeks ago, there was a slew of slew of EOs, of executive orders that came out, and there was a package of them on nuclear energy. And this was intriguing. Obviously, our Energy Policy Committee, very active and engaged Energy Policy Committee, has weighed in on the importance of nuclear energy as a solution to future energy needs here in the United States, and investment in technologies related to that. And so these EOs were welcome news. The general sort of overview reaction among some of our members was that a lot of these are very ambitious. It also tends to be a little bit narrow because these are really just focused on the federal government. And a lot of the technologies that it sort of is trying, that would be needed to implement these, just aren't mature yet. So it's ambitious. And because it's an executive order, the next administration can always make changes to it. Regardless, we were pretty pleased to see this batch, and I think it's fair to say that it was pretty welcome news among a number of our membership, within the committee in particular. Events. Myself, a number of our colleagues here in Washington attended the second annual State of the Science Address at the National Academies of Science. Very interesting time to be doing this, obviously. I highly recommend that you go watch the webcast of this. The head of NAS, Ms. Nutt, gave an absolutely wonderful presentation, and it was followed by a pretty good panel discussion that included a number of pretty high-level experts in R&D and in scientific spending, scientific research. And it was one of those, the alarm bells were sounding kind of things, and you didn't really feel good when you left. The pessimism was there, frankly, but it was a good dose of reality because there were also some solutions put forth that I think we all can take to heart and look to act on. So go take a look at that. It's worth your time. And on brighter news, our interns are here. As many of you know, we have been a big part of the Washington internship for students of engineering, WISE, the WISE internship program. Every summer, we bring a handful of undergraduates here to Washington, D.C., and support them as they go through the summer researching key policy topics of interest to them. And it's always fun when this happens. Summer is intern season here in Washington, D.C., and certainly we are not the only ones in Washington that have interns. Almost everybody has interns. And the city kind of transforms a little bit when that happens. And it's kind of fun to see all these young people in Washington going about, learning about the city and about the policy world that they're diving into as a college student. Number of students from a number of different colleges and universities looking at a lot of interesting topics. They tend to partner and mentor with some of our members. If you're mentoring one of them, thank you very much. You're very important to this process. And we're always looking to spread the word about this program. So if you are a college student, if you know college students who might be interested in the summer in Washington, we really want to encourage our brightest in universities to take a look at this program for the summer and consider applying, because it's a great time. And everybody that comes through here has a lot of positive things to say about their experience. And I did mention, I previewed this last time. I think we were a few days ahead, before, but we had the latest of our iWork conferences. This one was kind of focused on AI, and we went to Portland, Maine for this one, and it was an outstanding event, I have to say. I've done all the iWorks so far that we've had, and this really, it sort of, everyone we do ups the bar, and it's a lot of fun to do. And Portland's a great place to go do it. We had a lot of support from both Region 1 and Region 2, and we really appreciate that. A lot of these things can't really come off in as wonderful a way as they do without the leadership of the volunteers, of the regions, and of the sections. So we really appreciate that. We were able to get some welcome greetings from the 2 United States senators from Maine, Susan Collins, who you see in the bottom right here, the same Susan Collins, who is the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. So it's always good to have a good direct line into her office. And then Senator Angus King as well. They both provided some really nice welcome remarks. A great day of discussions and conversations about bringing more AI resources, more collaboration into the state of Maine and the greater northern New England region. So it was a great time. And last but not least, there's the cruise. It's coming. This is going to be a good one. If you haven't registered, if you've got the time, if you've even been thinking about it, go do yourself a favor and look at booking a cabin. This is a great experience, and that's really all I can say about it because I've been plugging this for a while. And if you haven't thought about it by now, you're going to miss something. So that's all I have. I did this in half an hour. Usually I try and whip through these in about 15 or 20 minutes, but a lot going on. So let me open up the question portal and see what I can find of interest from you guys that needs answering. All right. I'll just throw out the cliche, I left you dumbfounded, or I've answered everything you had because I'm not seeing anything. So thanks, as always. We're busy here. We've got a lot going on. There's a lot at stake. We really appreciate the support of all of our members. And please do go take a look at that action alert and weigh in with your members of Congress. This is a big deal. You know that. And we are doing what we can to sort of push against a very, very strong set of headwinds here. But it's going to take all of us. So that's all I have. And I look forward to seeing everybody next month after the 4th of July. Take care.
AI is changing our world at a tremendous pace. We need to be prepared for these changes. We need to understand how AI is affecting our lives, our societies, and even our psychology. I believe that this is the most important work in the world right now. IEEE is bringing people together from all around the world to work on some of the world's most difficult problems. IEEE is my competitive edge.